Hi guys and girls, Emma again. Welcome back to this little Patreon build. This little traction engine. Next project for me is the burner. And that's on page, if you've downloaded the book, it's on page 79. There's really only 3 or 4 pieces. It's very, very simple. There's a piece of 1mm copper or brass. It says brass. I've used copper because I've got a bit. And I've cut that to size, which is 60mm by 120mm. There's a piece for the top, which is quite a lot thinner. It's 0.5mm, 36 by 96, and I've cut that to size too. There's a piece of gauze, it's stainless steel. Now, a bit difficult to find. I ended up at the dollar store. And bought a splash guard for a wok, something like that. It only cost me like nothing. And I've cut this stainless steel mesh out with the scissors to the right diameter, and I'll put this away for something else. So that's quite thin, and I had no problems cutting that with scissors. And I've got a piece of mesh, so you see that. So that was easy enough. There's a handle that's made of rod. Got a bit of dowel for that, and there's a 3mm bolt, which probably isn't really the answer, but it'll do for a bit. Having said that, I think it needs to be a different bolt, and I might just go and get one in the morning that's going to do the job a little bit better. Also need a bit of asbestos, or say asbestos, it's not really. We need a bit of fireproof blanket or wool. Fiberglass wool's probably about what it needs. So I've got some, but it's in rope form, and I really don't want to use it because it's helpful. It's probably going to be useful one day. So I'm probably going to find some of that before this video's over as well. Anyway, not that difficult. Got these bits nice and flat and bent and cut out. Getting this flat's a difficult thing because it's quite a thick piece of sheet, and the best way is probably to cut it out with a hacksaw and file it up. I've actually cut it with the tin snips and then annealed it and flattened it, which I'm not sure whether that was a sensible thing or not. Marking this out's pretty simple. There's a line 15mm down each side, and 15mm across the end, and then at 14mm to cut the corners out, so it all folds up without a gap on the corners, and it's easy to solder. So this is just a very basic tray. Its one criteria is that it needs to go in this hole at the back. If we get our trusty plastic verniers, there's heaps of room there, so that's not going to be a big deal. I think more it's aligned by this piece here. So plenty of room there. Let's mark this up and cut the corners out with a little saw or with a hacksaw. The nibblers and cut the corners in with the hacksaw probably. It won't take a lot to do. And fold him up. This needs a slot in it to go on top. And this needs to be folded up, and then our whole lot needs to be soldered together. Very, very simple job to mark that out. We can nearly follow this along the line with the tin snips, but leave a little bit to file it up because it'll make a much nicer job of fitting it all together. And don't overcut, just run up to the line and then twist the piece out afterwards, and you can file the corner out and not have too many leaks then. Next job's a filing job, and I'm just going to file these up to the corners, up to the lines, nice and neat all the way around. And I'm going to put a little bit of an undercut in there with the hacksaw so that everything folds up neatly. When I've done that, we'll have a look and we'll see what we end up with. So there we go. I put a little nick in here, I think you can probably see that, down to this line, just on each side. These are about 1 millimetre proud, which is the thickness of the material. The next thing is to fold this up, just on this line, this side and this side. I'm going to use my pan brake for this, because it's probably the easiest way to do it. However, it's not set up anywhere where I can actually use it here on this bench. That will change in the future, but right now I've got to take it sort of over the other side of the room and outside and so forth and so on. So what I'm going to do is put in the pan brake on that line and just bend these to 90 degrees, and then clamp these, probably either use the brake with a short jaw, or you could find a block of wood or 2 blocks of wood and bend them with a hammer in the vise, or a block of brass or something like that. But what we need to do is bend these all up, so that one's up there and that one's up there and these two are up there, and then file them off flat on top and tidy up the corners, and we're going to silver solder them up. So let's bend them up. So that's that all bent up into a little tray like that. I did go to the trouble of putting a 3mm hole for the handle. This won't be anything like the bolt that I'm going to use. It really needs a pan head or a flat head, and I believe that's probably a 4mm bolt to start with. But I did drill it 3.2 or 3mm 1/8, something like that, whatever bolt you're going to use. And it's worth taking a little bit of time to get this all nice and square and tidy, if such a thing is possible. But we've got a little square box like this, and these are all folded up so that they overlap nicely, so we'll get nice clean solder fillets through here, I hope. We're going to silver solder this piece, and then the lid, which is this piece, will be high temp soft soldered onto the top there like that when it's all assembled as a final operation. So we really need it to be nice and neat around there, and take a bit of time to get that right. And then we'll drop them in the pickle overnight, same as we did for the boiler. And in the morning I'm going to solder these up, and we can cut the slot in there, a 7mm slot along there, and cut some fiberglass, or find some fiberglass to go in there and bend this up to hold it in place. And this goes over the top, and our handle goes on. We've got a pretty serviceable little burner then. So let's pickle this up and silver solder it next. So it's daylight again, and this has had a run through the pickle bath overnight. It's nice and clean. I've found a brass screw to go in the bottom here, and I've dropped that through the hole, and I'm just going to silver solder that as well. It just wants a tiny dot on there, and it wants the 4 corners running round. A little bit of flux and some silver. We've got some 45% again. Nice, quick, easy job. And just some Easy Weld or Easy Flow or whatever, white silver solder paste will do, whatever you got. that should be pretty good. Back in the pickle bath when it cools a little bit, and clean him up. We're going to need to straighten that screw up a little bit. But if we have a bit of a look here, all these holes should have solder flowed into them beautifully. We can give this a clean up. And file the top off nice and square. That'll be the next job. So next job really is to cut the slot in this top plate. It's just got a 7mm slot, a hole in each end. The book says drill our holes with a drill ground for thin metal, because this will grab. Lots of speed and a little bit at a time. You'll get it with an ordinary twist drill, but don't rely on it, and you didn't hear that here. Best thing's probably a step drill if you've got a metric one. That will leave a burr on it and it'll get it pretty hot. But back it on a piece of wood and then drill both holes, and I'm just going to use the nibbler, which is probably the easiest and quickest way to trim that out after I've marked the sides of the holes. So I've cleaned this up so that it's got nice round edges. That should fit nicely on top of the other piece. But let's drill a couple of holes and cut the slot out. So there we go. Probably the other way we could do this is chain drill it, or we could use a, like it says in the book, we could use a jeweler's saw and cut it out. That's a lot of hard work. If you drill the main holes and then drill a smaller hole all the way along, get a round file or a chainsaw file or something like that, put them in the vise parallel with the hole so you don't undercut, cut all the bits out and then file each edge. It's only going to take you 10 minutes to finish that. No exaggeration, it's not a big job. It's a fairly daunting task, but you can do fairly nice results without too much trouble. I ended up chain drilling it because the sad and unhappy reality is that the nibbler won't go through the slot. So that's how I did it, and that's how I know it only took probably 10 minutes to file that up. This piece of mesh goes in underneath. This is starting to clean up. Probably needs a little bit longer. Some triple O steel all around all these pieces will make them all bright and shiny and nice. Don't leave bits out on the bench when you're soldering because it does catch fire. It's still got a bit of discoloration on the end there, so I'm going to put this back in the pickle bath for a little while. Probably till after lunch. And this will soft solder on here with the asbestos sheet of asbestos or fiberglass fibres in the middle. And this of course needs to be bent. Just a little crease on each end. And that's by virtue of putting it in the vise and bending it up. This is pretty fragile, but that's sort of what it looks like when it's done. It's not a very easy material to work with at all, and if you're not careful it'll come unravelled. Speaking of coming unravelled, this is a piece of fire blanket. It's fiberglass. It cuts okay with the scissors, I've discovered. And a new fire blanket, which incidentally you should have two of, was $7.50 at the big box hardware. That's Australian, so go and get one, hang one up somewhere where you can reach it, where you can pull the tabs and drag the fire out if you do have a problem. It's not a bad thing to have in the shop. And buy a spare one to chop up for burners. What I've done is cut a square that's about the same, about big enough to fit in this little tray, and I've pulled the fibres apart so that there's enough of them to fill it up. So we'll end up with quite a pile of these. Unfortunately, filling this up with glass fibre doesn't really look like it's going to be a fun job. To do it neatly and nicely is going to take a little bit. I'm afraid that making you watch me do this is going to challenge your attention span a bit. So I'm going to turn the camera off and we'll have another look when it's all together. So there we go. It's pretty well packed full. There's a lot more fire blanket in there than I sort of expected. There's a piece about, I guess, maybe 14 inches by 4 inches. It's quite a big piece of fire blanket went in there once you tear it up. But that looks pretty good to me. This cover here will go on top. We don't want any strands sticking out the top. And we're going to turn this over and just run a soft solder bead around the outside. Then about all we've got to do is put a handle on it. So we want that hanging out an even amount each side and nice and square, I think. And probably ordinary silver or soft solder will do it. I've got some of this rosin coiled silver. I'm going to run that round it, I think. This is a Sigwell product, or BOC. It's called High Strength Silver Solder Kit. I haven't used it yet, so we'll see how it goes. Probably this wants a fire brick sitting on top there like that. And I'm suspicious an acid brush and some Baker's soldering fluid around there might make a bit of a difference too, to the way it runs. So we've got a pretty reasonable solder joint around there, I think. It's a nice shiny line all the way around. It's liquid when it was wet. And now it's cooled. That looks alright. I'm going to let that cool off. And we'll have a bit of a look at making a handle for it. So next thing's a little handle. And this is mostly handwork. I've just got a piece of dowel here that's going to be good enough. It's going to stain a bit, so I'm probably going to put some wax on it or something like that. A bit of phenolic or a bit of Bakelite rod or something like that. I thought I had some here somewhere, but I can't find it. It's probably the best thing for a handle like this. It needs to be a bit heat proof. You don't want aluminium or brass because you'll burn your fingers, but just about anything else will do. You could cast one from plastic, you could 3D print one probably. I don't think it's going to get that hot. But I ended up making a nut for this. It's got a little shoulder on it like that, because that just seemed to be the neatest way to do it. And it's just a bit of hex brass with a hole tapped through it and a shoulder on it to match the screw. Realistically now I want to drill this through to match that all the way through, and then countersunk it so that this, or counterbore it so that this nut will go down inside it nicely and fit properly, and then put a bit of shape in this maybe and part it off and give it a polish. That's pretty easy. Not a big job to turn wood. Before you're all jumping up and down at me for turning wood on a precision lathe, all these on the launch, all these covers are all plated in, so there's no way any dust can get inside this machine, which is really nice. And this machine needs a bag cleaned today anyway, so that's on the agenda this afternoon. I've actually gone quite a bit bigger than the thread, because if this gets damp it'll swell up and it'll split, and then you'll have to make another one. And that looks like it's probably deep enough. And that looks like that's going to be pretty good. So there we go, that's the burner. It's a bit heavier than I expected because that fiberglass wool, there's a bit of weight in a fire blanket, and there's a bit of material in it too, but it's a nice looking burner. It's got a slot there with the gauze, and I've got a finished handle there with a nut on it. It's all nice and tight. This just sits in there like that. So it's another part done. Guess the only thing to do now really is to see if it works. Looks like the funnel's still the best way. Need to see where it's leaking, if it's leaking. If we've done our job properly, it shouldn't be leaking. It looks like it probably isn't. That splash was just a bit of overfill. That's given us a really nice clean blue flame, and we can feel the heat. I can get my hand on there down to about, look, within about 4 inches of it. So that should be really good. It's pretty warm down there. I think that'll fire that engine quite well. So thanks for watching, guys and girls. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you're watching this on YouTube. If you're watching it on Patreon, big thanks for all your support. Don't give up on me just yet. I am working pretty hard in the day job, which is annoying me a lot because I don't get a chance to do jobs like this. I'm going to get on in the next week or so and make all the parts for the engine and get them uploaded to video. I'd like to see this project finished. We've still got to do the engine, we've still got to do the canopy, we've got to pressure test the boiler. There's a cylinder, conrod, crankshaft, pulley, a valve block, and some sheet metal work for the canopy, a couple of supports, and then maybe some paint. So there's a bit involved in it, but we can condense it down because most of them are only little 2 or 3 operation jobs. Anyway, really pleased with that burner. Not sure you can actually see it working there. It is a methylated spirits burner, so it burns nearly clear. But pretty good way to make a little burner. Be kind to each other, and more soon.